Have you ever picked up a new smartphone, admired how sleek it is, but then thought, why doesn't this battery feel bigger? Aren't they supposed to improve?
Right. It's a really common feeling, that frustration.
Yeah, like battery tech has just sort of hit a wall, but everything else is leaping ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what's really going on with smartphone batteries. We've looked at the trends, the research.
Yeah, source, smartphone battery trends, strategic balance in design and power, and some other notes.
Exactly. And what we found might surprise you. Our mission is to figure out why this perceived stasis isn't really stagnation. It's actually, well, it's a pretty sophisticated strategic game by the big players, Samsung, Apple, Google.
That's right. I'm going to pull back the curtain a bit, show you the complex mix of, design choices, tech advances, clever software.
And even how your expectations fit in.
Absolutely. It
Mhm.
all plays a part. The goal is to give you the complete picture, get beyond just looking at the battery size number, and understand the real evolution of smartphone power.
Okay, so first things first. Let's challenge that idea that battery sizes haven't increased at all.
Right, because well, it's a mischaracterization, really.
Yeah.
The source shows there are incremental capacity improvements.
So they are getting bigger, just slowly.
Pretty much. If you look at the actual numbers, the data, take Apple.
Yep.
The iPhone 15 Pro Max, that went up by 118 milliamp to 4,441.
Okay.
The 15 Pro got a bump to 74 milliamp.
Yeah.
Even the regular iPhone 15 went up by 70 milliamp.
Hmm.
And Samsung, the Galaxy S24 Plus, that was a pretty decent jump, 300 milliamp more than 4,900. The S24 base model also got 100 milliamp extra.
So not stagnant then. What about Google?
Similar story, Pixel 8 Pro added 50 milliamp, and the Pixel 8 gained a solid 220 milliamp. And looking ahead, there are rumors, right? iPhone 17 Pro Max possibly nearing 5,000 milliamp.
Wow.
And the Pixel 10 Pro XL may be hitting 5,200 milliamp. So definitely upward movement, just gradual.
Okay, but hang on. If the capacities are going up, even incrementally, why does it sometimes feel like battery life isn't improving or sometimes even feels worse? You mentioned the discrepancy between raw capacity and real-world endurance.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that exact point. It's not always a direct correlation.
How so?
Well, take the iPhone 15 Pro Max again. Bigger battery, right?
Right.
But some tests showed it actually had maybe 3 hours less endurance than the 14 Pro Max it replaced.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
It does. But then look at the base iPhone 15. Smaller battery increase, only 70 milliamp, but it tested with 8 hours more endurance than the iPhone 14.
Whoa. Okay, so something else is going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Galaxy S24, modest battery increase, but it achieved a higher active use score. It just hammers home that raw that number. It isn't the only thing that matters, not by a long shot.
So efficiency, software, the processor, all that stuff is playing a huge role.
A critical role, sometimes even outweighing those small battery size increases.
Which brings us to the why. Why aren't those raw capacities growing even faster if tech is improving? Let's talk about the limits, starting with the physical design. That relentless pursuit of sleek, thin, and lightweight phones. You called it the thinness tax.
And it really is a tax.
Yeah.
Think about it. You make a phone thinner, you just have less internal volume, less space for everything.
Including the battery, obviously.
Obviously, but also for other complex parts like sophisticated camera systems. Their rumored Galaxy S25 Edge supposed to be super thin, like 5.8 millimeter.
That's really thin.
It is, and because of that, the reports suggest it might have a simpler dual camera setup, maybe lose the optical zoom. That's a direct consequence of prioritizing that slim profile.
And heat. I imagine packing everything tighter makes heat an issue.
Huge issue. Less space means worse heat dissipation. So even if you have a powerful chip, a really thin phone might throttle performance under load just to manage the temperature.
So your super fast phone might not feel so fast when you're really pushing it.
Exactly. The S25 Edge is potentially an example of this. Might score well on benchmarks, but throttle in real-world heavy use, and then there's durability.
Oh yeah, I remember the iPhone 6 Bendgate. Thinner isn't always stronger.
Precisely. And even things like haptics, the vibration feedback. Some people find it feels a bit hollow or weak in very thin phones.
So it really sounds like a conscious choice by manufacturers. They're prioritizing that thin, sleek feel, even if it means compromises elsewhere.
It seems that way. Samsung's whole philosophy for that S25 Edge seems to be about delivering that ultra-thin flagship experience, even with a reportedly smaller 3,900 mAh battery.
And Apple's rumored iPhone 17 Air model, potentially needing a battery case. That really says something about prioritizing form factor.
It absolutely does. It highlights how much that physical design acts as a barrier to just throwing in a massive battery, but it's not just the physical space.
Right, you mentioned the chemistry too. Lithium-ion.
Yeah, the fundamental lithium-ion technology itself,
Yeah.
well, it's mature tech. It's largely reached a capacity ceiling in its current form. Getting big leaps now requires fundamentally new chemistry.
Why is that? What's the bottleneck with lithium-ion?
Safety is a huge factor. You could use pure lithium metal for the anode, which holds more energy, but the problem is dendrite growth.
Dendrites,
Yeah,
like little trees.
kinda, yeah. Tiny, sharp protrusions of lithium that can grow during charging. If they grow too much, they can pierce the separator inside the battery, cause a short circuit, and, well, potentially fires or explosions.
Okay, that's bad.
Very bad. So instead, manufacturers use graphite for the anode. It's much safer, prevents dendrites, but it just doesn't hold as much energy as pure lithium. It's a safety trade-off that limits density.
And the casing. Batteries aren't just the raw chemicals, are they?
No, they need robust housing, usually plastic, to protect against punctures, leaks, general damage. That casing adds bulk and weight, further limiting how much actual energy-storing material you can pack into a given volume.
So manufacturers are basically pushing right up against the safe, practical limits of current Li-ion tech within these thin designs.
That's a good way to put it. They're squeezing out what they can, but hitting physical and chemical walls.
Okay, so if battery sizes are constrained and thinness is a priority, how are phones lasting longer, or at least holding their own? This brings us to the unsung heroes, right? The efficiency gains.
Exactly. This is where the really clever stuff
Yeah.
happens. It's not just one thing, it's improvements across the board.
Like the processors.
Definitely. Processor and modem innovations are huge. Think about the manufacturing process moving to smaller nanometer nodes, like from 5 millimeter down to 4 millimeter, or even 3 millimeter.
Like Apple's A16 Bionic or the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3.
Precisely. Smaller transistors generally use less power for the same performance, or offer more performance for the same power. It's like building a more efficient engine. But it's also about the design of the chip, the architecture.
How so?
Well, chip designers like ARM are constantly optimizing. Their Cortex A320 core, for instance, boasts like 50% better efficiency than its predecessor, and huge gains in machine learning efficiency too.
And the modem, the part that connects to cellular networks.
Yeah, those are getting more frugal too. Chips like Samsung's Exynos 5400 or Qualcomm's X85 are designed to sip power while maintaining strong connections. Every little bit helps.
Okay, processors and modems. What else? The display. That uses a lot of power.
Oh, absolutely. Here's where it gets really interesting. Display technology evolution. Displays are often the biggest power drain,
Right.
but technologies like LTPO OLED have been game changers.
That's the one with variable refresh rate.
Exactly. It lets the display dynamically shift its refresh rate. So if you're looking at a static photo, it can drop way down, maybe to 1 hertz refreshing just once per second.
Saves a ton of power, I bet.
A huge amount. But then if you start scrolling, it instantly ramps up to 120 hertz or whatever the max is for smooth motion. That flexibility substantially improves battery life.
And the panels themselves are getting better, too.
Yes, newer generations of OLED panels, like Samsung's M14 or M50 materials, or LG's hybrid tandem OLED, are just inherently more power efficient. We're talking improvements in the range of 15% to maybe even 30% better power usage than older panels.
Wow, okay. Processors, displays. What about the software, the OS?
Crucial. Software and operating system optimizations are constantly working behind the scenes. Think about Android's adaptive battery.
Right, that learns your habits.
Yeah, it figures out which apps you use often and prioritizes battery for them while restricting apps you rarely touch, putting them into sleep or deep sleep modes.
And iOS has low power mode.
Right, which dims the screen, cuts background activity. Very effective. Plus, features like controlling background app refresh give you more granular control. These aren't minor tweaks. They actively manage power consumption minute by minute.
And there are even features focused on the battery's health over time, right?
Yes. Battery health features. Apple's iOS, for example, have performance management that can throttle the CPU or GPU slightly if the battery is old or cold to prevent unexpected shutdowns.
Protecting the battery and the user experience?
Exactly. And Google's Pixel phones have a battery health assistant that adjusts charging voltage and speed over time to slow down the aging process of the battery itself.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, all these efficiency gains, they add up.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
These compounded gains mean that even if the battery capacity only increases a tiny bit, or sometimes even stays the same, the overall endurance you experience can still improve noticeably.
Like that Galaxy S24 example.
Precisely. Only 100 mAh more battery, but a better active use score. It really shows a strategic shift, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's less about just brute forcing bigger batteries and more about maximizing the efficiency of everything hardware and software.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's another player in this strategic game, isn't there? Us, the consumer.
Ah, yes.
You. Our behavior, our expectations, they shape these decisions too. There's this thing the source is called the design versus battery life conundrum.
And it is a conundrum.
Right.
It's fascinating, actually. When you ask people directly, the research is clear. Battery life is explicitly identified as the top priority. About 20% of people say that.
Okay, number one priority. What about design?
Design. That's way down the list.
Yeah.
Only about 2.1% list design as their top priority.
Wow, huge difference. 20% for battery, 2% for design.
Right. But what do manufacturers keep pushing? Ultra-thin designs, like that Galaxy S25 Edge or the rumored thin iPhone 17 Air. Designs that might even compromise on battery capacity to achieve that thinness.
So, wait. We say we want battery life, but manufacturers push thin designs that potentially hurt battery life. What's going on there?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? 'Cause this raises an important point for you listening right now. Is there maybe an unstated desire for thinness and lightness? Something we don't explicitly say is top priority, but subconsciously we gravitate towards it. We pick up the thinner phone in the store.
Or are manufacturers kind of leading us, or are they subtly shaping consumer preferences towards these sleek designs because, well, maybe it's easier for them to deliver that and then compensate for battery limitations in other ways?
It's probably a bit of both. A really complex dynamic between what we say we want, what we actually buy, and what manufacturers decide to focus on.
And one of those major other ways to compensate, maybe the biggest one, is fast charging.
Oh, absolutely transformative. Fast charging has fundamentally reshaped user expectations about battery life.
How so?
Well, think about it. It's become almost an indispensable feature. If you know you can plug your phone in for just, say, 20 or 30 minutes and get a significant boost, maybe 50% charge or more.
Then maybe you don't need the phone to last 2 full days on a single charge.
Exactly. It drastically reduces battery anxiety. Knowing you can quickly top up minimizes downtime and makes the absolute maximum capacity less critical.
And the speeds are getting pretty crazy.
They are. Apple's still relatively conservative. The iPhone 15 Pro Max charges at maybe 27 watts. Takes around 109 minutes for a full charge.
Okay.
But Samsung's Galaxy S24 Ultra does 45 watts, gets full in about 65 minutes. The base S24 is 25 watts, around 75 minutes.
And others are going even faster.
Oh yeah. Some competitors, especially out of China, are pushing well over 100 watts. Even the Nothing Phone 3 is rumored at 65W. The speeds are really climbing.
Does charging that fast hurt the battery long term, though? That's always been a concern.
It's a valid concern, and manufacturers know it. That's why they've developed all sorts of mitigation techniques. Things like really careful temperature regulation during charging, adaptive charging that learns your overnight routine and slows down the final charge phase.
Right, so it hits 100% just before you wake up.
Exactly. And multi-stage protocols that might blast power in quickly at the beginning when the battery is empty, but then taper off the speed as it fills up. All designed to minimize heat and stress, protecting the battery's long-term health.
So what does this all mean? Where does it leave us?
Well, it suggests we've kind of entered a good enough battery life paradigm, maybe?
Good enough.
Yeah. If a phone can reliably last you through a typical day, from morning till night.
Which most flagships can now, generally.
Generally, yes. And if you have the safety net of rapid replenishment, that quick charge capability, then the intense pressure to create phones with massive multi-day batteries maybe eases off a bit.
Ah, I see. Which then frees up manufacturers, too.
To keep prioritizing those sleek, thin designs that maybe do appeal to us aesthetically, even if we don't rank design #1 in surveys. They can balance the equation, knowing fast charging picks up the slack.
It's a subtle shift, but yeah, incredibly powerful in shaping the phones we actually get. So, circling back then, the main takeaway here is that what looks like stagnation in smartphone batteries isn't really stagnation at all.
Not at all. It's a calculated evolution.
Right, a really complex balancing act, pushing design, squeezing every bit of efficiency out of the hardware and software.
And leaning really heavily on the convenience of fast charging to bridge any gaps.
But the evolution isn't stopping there, is it? What about the future? You mentioned new chemistries earlier.
Exactly. The future looks genuinely exciting. We're definitely on the cusp of seeing some promising emerging battery chemistries make their way into mainstream phones.
Like what?
Well, the one that seems closest to widespread adoption is silicon carbon-infused batteries, or SiCs.
Silicon carbon. What's the advantage?
Higher energy density. It basically allows you to store more energy in the same amount of space. We're talking maybe a 10–15% capacity increase without making the battery physically larger.
10–15%? That sounds pretty significant.
It is. It's already enabling some manufacturers, particularly in China, to push capacity significantly higher in their 2025 flagships. Phones like the OnePlus 13, Realme GT7 Pro, Vivo IQ0013, they're reportedly launching with 6,000 mAh batteries, thanks to this tech.
6,000. That's a big number compared to what we typically see in Western flagships.
It really is. And beyond 6ms, there are other chemistries bubbling up. Solid-state batteries are the holy grail for many.
Higher density, safer, longer lifespan.
That's the promise.
Yeah.
But they're still mostly in the prototype stage, facing manufacturing challenges. Then you've got sodium-ion, which could be cheaper and uses more abundant materials. Graphene-based batteries might offer faster charging and higher capacity. Lithium-sulfur, lithium-silicon, lots of research happening.
Yeah. So, okay, if these new chemistries like Surrey start rolling out and we combine that with even more efficient chips, say 3-nanometer processors and those super efficient OLED displays we talked about, what does that mean for the actual battery life you might experience?
The implications are pretty profound. You start compounding these gains, maybe 10–15% from the battery chemistry, plus continued efficiency savings from chips and displays. You could realistically see overall battery life gains in the range of 20–33%, maybe even more.
30–33% longer?
Potentially, yeah. That could fundamentally shift expectations. It might mean that getting 2 days of use becomes the new baseline for a typical smartphone.
Wow. 2 days is standard.
And maybe many users could stretch it to 3 days on a single charge. It really changes the game.
You mentioned the Chinese flagships are already hitting 6,000 mAh with Surrey. What about Apple, Samsung, Google?
Well, that's where it gets interesting again. There seems to be a strategic lag in adoption by Western flagship brands, or at least a different set of priorities.
How so?
Like we said, rumors of the iPhone 17 Pro Max at maybe 5,000 mAh still lagging behind those 6,000 mAh phones, and that Samsung S25 Edge. The rumors suggest it's actually reducing battery capacity compared to the S24, prioritizing thinness over leveraging new tech for maximum capacity.
So the tech for much bigger batteries is arriving, but maybe not everyone will jump on it immediately or in the same way.
It seems that way, which this raises an important question.
Go on.
Well, it leads to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Okay.
Given that this significantly better battery technology is coming, it's practically imminent. How might your expectations change? How will you value that trade-off between design and endurance?
Will that thinness tax start to feel unacceptable if you know a slightly thicker phone could easily last 2 or 3 days?
Exactly. Or will manufacturers find clever new ways to give us both keep the aesthetics we seem to like, but also deliver that incredible multi-day battery life using these new technologies? Could that become the next big competitive differentiator?
Something to definitely think about next time you reach for your charger, right?
Absolutely. The landscape might be about to shift quite dramatically.